Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. It's 20 seconds early, but I think it's okay to start just a bit early. My name is Amanda Robinson. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Manager at CDHS, and welcome to Coloring Outside the Lines. Before we get started, I wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that Leslie Blankus is going to be our interpreter for the day. If you have any issues seeing her, please let me know. We're happy to stop the presentation and make sure that this is accessible for everyone who is here. I will be running the tech. So if anyone has any issues with sound or vision or anything, just let me know. But also remember, this is a virtual space, so please also have grace. The chat function, the Q&A function are both live, so feel free to enter your questions in the chat, enter your questions in the Q&A. You have the opportunity to upvote questions in the Q&A, so if someone asks a question that you really want to make sure we answer, please feel free to, I believe it's like it, and then it will move higher in the list the more votes it gets. And we also have a few polls that we will be launching throughout the presentation just to learn more about all of our attendees. It looks like we have almost 300 people here right now. Let me see if there's anything else. There will be a couple of resources and things talked about during today's presentation. I will make sure to get all of those sent to you in an email after, so feel free to just listen, ask questions, and engage as you can through the webinar. And I believe that's it. Yes? All right, and I will hand it over to Hannah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hannah Mathis. I use feminine pronouns, and I am so excited that we can have this statewide lunch and learn today. I want to honor and recognize that I am not part of either community. I'm not part of the LGBTQ+ community, nor am I part of the African American Black community. Rather, I am here in allyship. And I want to be really clear that I am using the term, and I hope you will join me. Allyship is a verb and not a noun. It's not a button part of my identity. Instead, it is a constant practice that I am committed to doing. With that said, today's goal is to really elevate the voices. We were talking about in the Equity Alliance here at the state, we were talking about two things. And we were recognizing that we were saying, okay, what are we doing for Juneteenth? Okay, what are we doing for Pride? As if they were two totally separate situations. And part of that has to do with history and how a specific group of people have been erased, right? The stories don't talk about those who have really led the way and have these beautiful intersectional identities. And so today, we are focusing on freedom for both of these populations and to elevate their voices, these voices that have lacked access and representation and erasure and have experienced the highest levels of violence in our country today. As we think about pride, we think about all of the whitewashing that happens with it. And we don't hear, for instance, about the folks like Marsha P, who have really made the movement and provided the freedoms that we have today. And I want, as we move forward and we hear about both the trials and tribulations, or the hurdles and the hatred, as we're saying it, and that we also remember the bravery in becoming, how powerful these folks who are here with us are today. So with that said, I am going to turn it over to Ursuline, who's going to introduce our moderator.
Thank you so much, Hannah. So my name is Ursuline Hope, and I am also here in allyship, and I think that it's a really important message to really communicate that although you may identify with certain elements of a community, it is also really vital that we support identities that we might not necessarily identify with. And so my pronouns are she, her, hers. I identify with the Black community. However, I really appreciate this opportunity to leverage my privilege as a cisgender Black woman and being able to really, to Hannah's point, be really intentional about mobilizing efforts in a variety of different communities. So I am ecstatic to be here, and I'm really excited to introduce Stacey Roberts, who is going to be your moderator for today. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Stacey. But before I do, I want to just read a little bit about Stacey and some of the efforts. So Stacey Roberts is a non-binary trans person working as a compliance specialist at the Division of Professions and Occupations at DORA, excuse me. They have been with the state a little over 2.5 years, excuse me. In their free time, they make hip hop music and advocate for marginalized communities through that medium, and others such as mutual and various works. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass the baton over to Stacey Roberts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Hello, welcome everybody. I'm so excited to have this conversation. Hope everybody's hearing me well. Like Ursuline mentioned, I do work for the state of Colorado, so I'm uniquely, I guess, interested in this conversation. I know normally we get these lunch and learn emails and it's like, oh, I might go to that one, learn about Google Slides or Google Sheets or something like that. But this was a little bit different. So certainly excited to be here. So I guess I'll go ahead and get started and then we'll just kind of go around, hopefully, and then I'll maybe button it up at the end with possibly something from a little bit specific state experience as well. So the way we're going to start it off is just specifically with the hurdles and hatred portion of this, as Hannah mentioned, kind of some of the trials and tribulations. So our first question is, how does society's heteronormativity and anti-Blackness impact your daily experience? I'm not sure who wants to start off, but feel free to jump in. And I know we have to do introductions as well, so.
Do we want to give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves first before we
Yeah,
dive into that light question?
yeah, yeah, no, super light.
I think, Danica, you were first.
I do believe I volunteered myself to go first. My name is Danica Shipley. I live in Aurora, Colorado. I think I've been in the state for somewhere between 6 and 7 years. Who knows? Time passes differently in the past year and a half or so. Previous to my current occupation, I was in the K through 12 education space. I spent a few years with Denver Public Schools. It's where I got to know Hannah, and then a couple years with a education nonprofit. Currently, I work at PepsiCo. Organization that a lot of folks probably know, recognizing the Frito-Lays and Pepsi products. And I'm in a brand new function called Data and Analytics that really is focusing on helping a legacy organization that's been around for over 100 years really have a digital transformation and use data more intentionally. From a DEI perspective, my role is really not tied to DEI, but it's something that I oftentimes do on the side. So within PepsiCo and data analytics in particular, I'm on a DEI subcommittee within our function that's really focusing on how we can embed DEI principles into our ways of working, whether that's hiring and retention of staff, making sure we're building inclusive products. We're building utilizing artificial intelligence, machine learning, that kind of stuff. And we know there's a lot of biases in data and modeling. So how are we disrupting those kind of deal and making sure we're not perpetuating harm in the models that we're creating? But then also how are we marketing our products to diverse, folks across the organization? We're a global organization and a global team. I'm currently helping to build a product that will go out to some 300,000 folks across the globe with different abilities, different languages, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I apply a DEI lens to my work.
Perfect. Ty, you're next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ty Crawford. I really don't use the pronouns, but I will tell you, I try to put the pronouns on there, but for some reason they did not stick. So if I had to use it, I will use she, he, they, Ty. You could just call me Ty. That's that's always great. I work for the foundation, which is formerly the Stapleton Foundation. I've been working with them for 14 years. I do community work is Be Well Health and Wellness. So I program free classes in the Denver Parks and Rec and in our apartment complexes, which is Northfield and Moline. I'm also the project manager of our youth program as well, and which is a youth training program to where we also teach our youth to go out and train them on just various things, heart health screenings, nutrition, physical fitness, mental health. And those are also the areas that I also work in when I'm providing programming and classes to the community at the rec centers as well. So we also focus on that. So our organization focuses on equity, giving everybody equal access in the community. So the community is in North Denver, which, well, East Park Hill, Northwest Aurora, Montbello, in those areas. We did a survey years ago, and a lot of those areas, a lot of people that lived in those areas at that time did not have access to affordable health care, or even just being able to go to the rec center. So we found that a lot of people suffer from chronic illnesses and diseases is based on not having access to, good food, nutrition classes, and things like that to help people just become better human beings. So that's what I do. I am very happy to be here. This is the first time I think that I've got chosen for something for being in the LGBT community and being Black. So rock on, you guys. I'm glad that you guys put this together. Normally we're not accepted for those things. And so to be able to be here and speak from our perspective, just being that is a great thing. So I appreciate being here. Thank you. I'm done.
That's great. We've already spoken with Stacy, so Joseph, would you like to go next?
My name is Joseph Lamar. I live in Denver, Colorado. I'm originally from Colorado Springs, Colorado. I've been in Denver for about 8 years. I'm a multidisciplinary artist with main focus on music. I'm a singer, a songwriter, a producer, a multi-instrumentalist, and I also am interested in multimedia visuals that accompany music. In November, I released an album called Sin Act 1. It's a concept album, and it's the first in the series of 3 albums. So there'll be 2 more installments over the next few years. And as far as my work is concerned, it's definitely a place where I explore identity. And it's a place where I sort of deconstruct things that I've learned or things that I've been indoctrinated with. Using art has always been a cathartic way of voicing those things and kind of staking a claim on the person I am and the person I'm becoming, and asserting that through my work. I'm also the director of music at Campbell Chapel AME Church. And at Campbell Chapel, a lot of my work is trying to bridge the secular and the spiritual with the musical selections, but also just my presence there, as well as, hoping to create a place where, spiritual spaces or church spaces are not homophobic or transphobic, hoping that by my presence there can invite other people to feel comfortable in those spaces.
Love that. Last but certainly not least, Saya.
Yay. Hi, everyone. My name is Saya B. Excuse me. Also, shout out to Ty. Hey, Ty. Nice to see you. Saw you at the gala chat. But yes, my name is Saya B. My pronouns are whatever you are feeling in the moment. There is no possible way for you to be wrong. I am a human. I do a lot of things. I'll mention a few of the things that I do. I am my own diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. I work for myself under Saya B Consulting because I be consulting, and that's on period. I run my framework is called Deep Dive DEI. As you can see, that is conveniently located by my name, deepdivedei.com if you want to learn more. But in a nutshell, what I do is I go into workspaces, and my goal is to shift the culture, to make a lot lot of times we think about policy, right? And we think about how we want to have a policy that hires and recruits more diverse and marginalized candidates for jobs, for positions, whatever. The problem being that once they get there, the culture of the workplace is not sustainable enough to keep these talented, magical people around. So I go in to help and educate about what does deconstructing white supremacy values and racism and all of these different things, whatever your focus point is, in a way that is affirming, in a way that is strengths-based, and that includes an intersectional lens. That looks like training, professional development, retreats, whatever that looks like for you, group facilitation in affinity spaces, or to work on cross-cultural communication. And lastly, what I call empathy coaching with leadership and a trickle-down effect. My idea is, right, if leadership can really grasp diversity, equity, and inclusion concepts in a way that is not just performative, it'll just show out in the rest of the culture, right? Because everyone's kind of looking for leadership to kind of make that standpoint. A couple of other things I want to shout out real quick. I'm also on the board of directors for 2 LGBTQ nonprofits. One of those is Joy's Resistance, which focuses on mental health for LGBTQ plus young people, specifically trying to start a mobile clinic that will be able to reach folks in rural communities and where there's less access to LGBTQ plus affirming therapists. And also I want to shout out Envision U, which is a mental health organization that focuses on LGBTQ plus substance use. And we are in the process of creating what we're calling the LGBTQ Family Summit. So especially if you are a parent of an LGBTQ young person and you're trying to learn how to better connect and affirm their identity and be a supportive figure, you need to come on through on July 17th. I'll send y'all the information, chat. Last thing I'm gonna mention, I am highly involved in the ballroom scene, local ballroom scene in Denver. If you're not familiar with the ballroom scene, I don't got time to get into it right now. Pose, Paris is Burning, Kiki. Those are some good documentaries for you to watch if you're interested in learning more, but just super excited to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you. So you've met all of our panelists. So I'm actually going to launch a poll question or 3 to learn a little bit about all of you. So feel free to give those answers while I give you a little introduction about kind of how we came to today. So as Hannah mentioned, one of the conversations that we have pretty regularly at Equity Alliance is around intersectionality and who is left out of the conversation. And so we started talking about prepping for Juneteenth and prepping for Pride. And we were like, why are we not having a conversation about the 2 points where those come together? It's such an important part of how Black civil rights have moved forward and how LGBTQ civil rights have moved forward. And so we really wanted to have a specific conversation that highlighted both groups kind of singularly, but also together, and highlighted the importance of where those groups intersect. So I know many of you are familiar with the Stonewall riots that happened in the 60s, but that is actually only one point of where these two communities have intersected and kind of melded their powers together to kind of move movements forward. So one of the resources we will provide you at the end will be a timeline of kind of all of the civil rights movements between these two groups and then the intersection points between them, so you can kind of continue your learning on that journey. But yeah, it's not just about Stonewall, it's not just about Pride, it's not just about Juneteenth, and it's not just about African American and Black civil rights. It's always about intersectionality, and we thought it was really important to highlight the tremendous impact that this community specifically has done to move both of these areas forward. So I am going to turn it over back to Stacy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for introducing yourselves. I kind of was a little excited, jumped the gun a little bit with the question, but now that we've kind of gone all the way around, we'll bring it back to that. So thanks for being patient with me on that. So again, the first question we're going to kick it off with is, how does society's heteronormativity and anti-Blackness impact your daily experience? And as far as our panelists, anybody can kind of, pop up and start, and then we can kind of move accordingly if y'all are comfortable with that. So anybody in particular want to start?
I got
Saya?
you.
Okay.
I got you. Yes, I think for me, right? And for just 1 second too, just to unpack those two words, right? Heteronormative for, for the people in the back chat, right? But heteronormativity, right, to me at least, means that our society is built around the concept or the assumption that everyone is straight and cis, and that is also kind of the lifestyle, quote unquote, that is the sexuality or gender or expression that you're supposed to have. Whereas, and did you use the word anti-blackness? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, heteronormativity
Perfect.
and anti-blackness.
Yes, whereas anti-blackness, our country has a very long history that I cannot get into right now around anti-blackness. For me, that shows up. I think the thing that is really hard to communicate a lot of times, or the things that is a very misconception about either heteronormativity and anti-blackness and navigating the world, is that we're so used to, and at least the way that I grew up, when I think about the history classes that I was in, it was very much episodic, whereas like slavery happens and then Abraham Lincoln frees the slaves and then everything's great. And then somehow it gets terrible again because Jim Crow. And then, right, it's more of this kind of, and then we are conditioned to kind of see racism as, blacks over here, whites over here, like obvious, blatant, explicit discrimination. And it's actually, to me, is very nuanced. It's very subliminal. For me, I realize that I'm very hyper aware of myself in certain settings. I've gotten to the point where I'm very privileged in that I am self-employed, and I have the option to choose who I'm interacting with, what clients I take on, and I have a lot of choice in that. And so I tend to surround folks that have similar identities to me, because that's where I'm most comfortable. I don't have to really think about how I'm showing up. I don't have to think about anything too stressful. I'm just existing. Versus me just trying to go to the store, I get stared at a lot. So I'm constantly checking people's body language. I'm checking people's facial reactions. I'm checking very small, minute details, because I've been conditioned and grew up in a way that those small, minute details are actually very important for my survival. That is how I'm using that to assess who is homophobic, who is racist, who has a problem with me, who does not have a problem with me. And I'm constantly feeling like I have to do that battle. So a lot of times I'm trying to actually make myself as invisible as possible, which does not happen. It was actually funny. I was on a date, and just to kind of even highlight a little bit of what privilege can look like, I was on a date one time with a white person. We went to a park because COVID, what else you gonna do? And as we were kind of getting settled and finding a spot, he was looking around and realized that like a lot of people were staring, and he was like, wow, I've never been stared at so much when I go out in public. And I'm like, yeah, that's because they're not staring at you, they're staring at me. Right, this is actually a very common experience for me of feeling very hyper visible. So for me, it's actually heteronormativity and anti-blackness. It shows up in everything. It shows up even in just social interactions and in small ways that people wouldn't necessarily think about.
And I think that like hyper scanning, right? That like looking around your environment and saying like, is this a safe space for me? Is this a safe person for me? I mean, like that's exhausting. Like I've noticed over the years that like my anxiety and like my mental health challenges have increased over time. Like I've become further away from what's considered the norm within our society. And in doing so, like I've, have experienced more discriminations as I've done so. So I do the exact same thing. It's like anytime I'm stepping outside of my house, my parents' house, like a close friend's house, those safe spaces for me, I am like constantly keyed into my environment. Like this summer, there was a lot of anti-Black violence and a lot of community trauma, both from a Black perspective, but also from an LGBTQ plus perspective. There's always that intersection between the two. And it's really hard. It's like when we live in a beautiful state, right? We like to get outdoors, ride bikes, go for hikes and stuff like that. When you see members of your community getting chased down and shot down for like jogging in the wrong community as perceived by others, like that impacts my willingness to like get on my bike and ride around in my neighborhood. Even though when I bought my house in my neighborhood, I made sure that like my fiance and I weren't the only Black or brown folks like in our community, because we didn't want to have to worry about that kind of stuff. But at the same time, we also still don't have the luxury of not worrying about those things too. I mean, it shows up in big things and it shows up in little things. Like what city or state can I move to? Like, where can I go work and feel safe? Like, but also, can I walk into a bathroom and be okay? Because as someone who's like gender nonconforming in their presentation, like when I walk into a women's restroom, I'm not just being misgendered as like a male, I'm being misgendered as a Black male. And that, like, in a predominantly white community, feels like it can have like an extra threat to like my personal existence. When I go to states or cities that are less inclusive than Colorado, like when we visit my fiance's family down in Phoenix, if I'm going to a public restroom, she's coming with me, because like their vibe there is different from our vibe here. And I need someone who's right by me, who has my back and can signify to others that like, it's okay for me to be in that space, which really, really sucks to require that. So like, it shows up like jobs, education, just like relaxing out in public. It shows up in truly everything, and it's exhausting. And that's like one of the reasons why our communities have such severe mental health issues too.
Yeah, I mean, I thank you both so much. I mean, I'll just kind of piggyback off of that, and then maybe, you know, some other folks will chime in as well. But I mean, just speaking from perspective of actually working here at the state, I mean, that's happened to me like my first 6 months working here, going to a restroom and having, you know, a white woman stop me and say, "Are you supposed to be in here?" And then my response being, sure, you know, like, cause that first interaction of, what do you mean? Like, being questioned that way, is, you know, it's a bit jarring. And then when you know, at least in my experience, try to reach out and say, hey, you know, I'm non-binary. Are there gender neutral restrooms? Like, I'm not familiar with this building. I'm not familiar with this place. And the response is, well, you can go to a different floor. You can go to a different bathroom, right? So for me, it's one of those things where it's like, not only does heteronormativity and anti-Blackness show up in there, because obviously I need to fall into some category in order to use this restroom, but also that person felt comfortable asking me that question because I am Black, because I am a dark-skinned person. They were able to want to, it's okay now, my body is not my own. So that's difficult to deal with, especially in a culture where there's no conversation about pronouns in training. There's no questions about, you know, accommodations. So you can put up, you know, a pride flag and things like that. But if you don't have the proper accommodations for people, you're signaling that you do not want them to work there. So that's why conversations like this are super important, just because that can change, you know, that type of culture. So yeah, let's get what some more folks have to say.
Stacy, Saya, and Danica, is that your name?
Danica,
yeah, I totally agree with you. That's the story of my life, just period. I've been living in this body, in this life for a very long time. And I'm not originally from here in Colorado, but I grew up here all my life. My mom is a part of the LGBTQ community. So that's the life that I grew up in. But as you were saying, Saya, about the, hyper visual, I think that's what you used.
Visibility.
Visibility, that's everywhere I go, like in the restroom. And that was one of my, the way I answered the question for the hurdles is, I'm so happy that they have these gender neutral restrooms in some areas. I'm so excited when I see that, because I don't have to make a choice, or I have to should I go home, or what do I have to do? Because it depends, because I show up a lot in masculine energy. So of course, if I have a baseball hat on, this and that, I get the stares all the time. And so I'm like, if I have to go to the bathroom, I just have to go in and do my thing. But it is challenging. And that's just, it's been a part of my life, but I've learned how to just cut it off. Even when I go places now, I've learned how to I'm like this, in your energy, you can feel it, you can see it, but as you're walking in it, that's just who you are. But the people that are around you, you may have family members or whatever, they're upset, because they're seeing the stares, they're seeing people saying they might try to fight for you. And you're like, I'm good, because I'm used to this type of stuff. This is just what happens. And I just think that, we as a community just have to continue to move forward and just continue to walk in authentically who we are. We cannot change that. And, I'm, like I said, once again, I'm grateful for the neutral gender bathrooms. They should put those everywhere, because I feel more comfortable being able to go to the restroom versus like, dang, and a lot of times, sometimes I be by myself, and I don't want to go into the men's restroom because, and then, the women, like you were saying, they freak out and act all crazy and stuff like that. So yeah, we're all rocking the same boat when it comes to that, and just being very visible and how people see and look at us. But after a while, you just kind of get used to it. That's all I have to say. Thank you all for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ty, for contributing that. And I mean, it kind of just comes full circle. Like Danica said, shows up work, everywhere. I think we may have lost, oh, Joseph is back. Joseph, did you want to chime in on that particular question? I know we had some technical issues.
Yeah, something happened with my internet. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you are back.
And where are we at in the discussion? Were we still on the first question, or is it you're on the second question?
First question. You're still good on the first one.
Okay. Well, yeah, I only got to hear Saya and Danica's responses, but both really resonated with me. Especially the parts about being hyper aware and hyper visible at the same time. And I think that for me personally, one of the ways that those things you mentioned, anti-Blackness and heteronormativity, have affected me is just sort of like I guess what I can only describe as like a fragmenting of myself. It's like feeling disconnected from myself, but also not feeling like a sense of like self-sovereignty early on, because you feel as if you are a sort of like living, breathing reflex to your environment, because you have to constantly change yourself to fit into a space, or you have to change yourself to be safe, or you're code switching. And so having a sense of like autonomy is something that and I'm sure a lot of us identify with, like having to really fight for that, because you're not trained to be that way. You're trained that there are these two lists of like things that are acceptable and things that are not acceptable. And like the things that are not acceptable are the things that you are. And so it's this sort of like Carl Jung kind of like shadow thing, where like the parts of you that are deemed unacceptable, you repress those parts of yourself and try not to express them in certain spaces. And so for me, I experienced a sort of like identity crisis of like, well, who am I if I'm someone different to every person I meet, based on their race, based on their gender, or based on if I'm the minority in the room. I've had to like work to really determine who I am and stake a claim on that and be proud of that. And even in moments when I'm unsure about my identity, that like to own that is meaningful too. But yeah, I think the biggest effect it had on me was that sort of like fragmenting. So for me, the wholeness comes from accepting myself and giving myself permission to be me in my multiplicity. Like I have the right to be this and that I don't have to be marginal, because part of the marginalization, I think, is you're not allowed to be complex. You're not allowed to be complicated. You're not allowed to be even confused about who you are, or in transition in terms of who you are. That you're not allowed to have that sort of journey. You're supposed to be something that we can contain and understand and label very easily. But we have a right to be all of who we are.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joseph. So I mean, just kind of segueing into the next question off of that, how do historical events or leaders inform the way you navigate the world? I know Joseph just kind of ended with being allowed to be fully all of who you are. So we can kind of speak to how historical events and leaders possibly, initiated us into that train of thought. So whoever wants to jump up can do so.
I don't necessarily have like an answer for like historical events or persons, but like I think it comes from like the way that I was raised. Like I grew up in upper middle class white suburbia, like one of three daughters in my family. And so like my parents were very cognizant of the fact that they were moving us to a place where we would likely be growing up and existing in spaces where we didn't see a lot of other folks like us, and that those same folks might try to put us down. So they were very intentional in terms of like, making sure that we saw ourselves as like beautiful human beings who are worth valuing and what have you. That was through the books in our home, the music that was played, the art on our walls. Like I do the same thing now in terms of making sure like me and my fiance are represented in our own home. And for me, like that teaching when it came to like my identity as a Black woman really just like easily transferred over to like my being LGBTQ plus as well. Like I never had that struggle myself of saying like something's wrong with you. Like I just had that recognition of like, oh, I'm different than other folks or different than who I thought I was, but that doesn't mean that I'm still not like, a human who's worth valuing and loving and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, still recognizing others may not be on board with that. So, I'm fortunate that I grew up in a family like that, who's loved me unconditionally as I've shifted and changed and grown over time, recognizing that a lot of folks in our communities don't have that experience, very unfortunately. But yeah, for me, it was like how I was raised, and that it has played a huge role in how I show up and with my resistance and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, I think that was so beautiful, Danica. I'm gonna get your name correct. I kind of have a kind of an opposite experience, as you kind of stated. Not everyone's kind of ends up like that. For me, it's interesting because I tell folks that, for example, I didn't really, because I'm 26 at this right now, and with everything that I'm doing now, a lot of folks have been asking me, oh, did you see yourself doing this at 26? And for me, I always answer with, I didn't see myself past the age of 18 because I didn't know what that life would be like. For me, everything was a problem. So, don't walk like this, don't talk like this, don't dance like this, don't do this, don't do X, Y, and Z. And that would come from family, that would come from friends, that would come from school. I remember I would sneak my heels to school and wear heels to school, and some teachers would threaten to call my mom, and like that would be like a severe punishment, right? And all of those messages, all of those incidences are messages, right? Saying that you do not belong here, something is wrong with you. You're not going to make it. I've been told like I didn't even deserve certain scholarships that I had because of my identities. Because when you see someone who is gender bendy, there's a lot of conditioning that we have around that people are disgusting, or that we are perverts, or that we are X, Y, and Z, and that really has a lasting impact. So for me, I feel like a lot of my life has been kind of trying to figure things out on my own and just trying to make my own way. Because for me, I'm like, this can't be possible. There has to be something better out there. When I think around historically, that's something that's actually been inspiring me more recently, especially as I dive more and more into the ballroom scene. The ballroom scene was actually started by a trans woman of color, Crystal LaBeija, who, was a part of the pageant scene, and there was racism, because it was the 60s. So racism was still very much present, and ballroom was actually created as a space for queer and trans people of color, specifically Black and Latine people of color who are queer and trans, to actually have a platform, to be seen as beautiful, to be seen as, that model on the cover of Vogue magazine. And as I ventured more, so one of my categories that I walk is Vogue Femme. And if you don't know what Vogue Femme is, that's a style of dance that originated from ballroom. And what I'm learning a lot about that is actually really kind of a healing experience, because it requires you to tap into all of the femininity that I wasn't able to access before. And not only wasn't I able to access, but this is a space where it's actually encouraged. So having a limp wrist, walking with a switch, like doing just hyper feminine things became as strength, right? It becomes something that is celebrated even. And so for me, that's actually been giving me a lot of confidence in how I even navigate the world generally. Because like, okay, well, if the girls over here think I'm sickening, then I know I'm sickening. Shoot, these girls who be, be going on tour and perform for Beyonce and doing all these legendary things, if they think that I got it and that there's something in me, then that actually has given me a lot of confidence that I've been working on. So yeah, I would say like for me, even it's not even like this big which of course we can name, like Malcolm X is obviously an icon to me. And at the same time, was he here for the trans folks? Not really. So like, it's kind of like you kind of have to, it's wild, like how you kind of have to navigate who your heroes are and like the things you have to accept about different things about them. So like for me, Crystal LaBeija is like a hero to me because she created a platform and an opportunity for folks like me to find healing and find authenticity.
Awesome. Sorry, thank you so much. I mean, from my perspective, kind of like what Danica said, there really wasn't anybody historically that I saw myself in that I could really relate to growing up, with the exception of the color of my skin. So I think through my family and other mediums, it was just kind of the message of live anyway, even if they don't want you to, even if they don't let you. You just have to continue to show up and be who you are, and authenticity essentially, will stand the test of time. So, yeah.
With me, I feel the same way, Stacy and Danica. Is that it? Danica. Not really heroes, but I can say heroes were the people that my mom hung around that, were already here doing their thing, in the clubs and things like that, the masculine center identity, those were my heroes because that's all I knew. So a lot of this historical stuff, and even with the pronouns and even with all these words, it's a lot because this is just something of who I am and how I was born. So there was no verbiage. And so it's very different to navigate and to make sure you're calling the person the right pronoun or this and that. So so I can just say the heroes were of my community because I was accepted as being young by the older community. I was sneaking in the clubs. And so that's what I knew. So I didn't see any different from that, so I was brought up, this is who you are. And I'm thankful that I did not have to hide that. A lot of people had to hide that part of them and, tell their family, years and years later, but that was just something that I grew up in, having two female parents, having that and being at the time, Cheeseman Park was the gay park. I promise you that it was, I promise you, but now it's not. But being there when me and my brother was little playing on the playground while my mom hung out with her friends of, same-sex relationships. So that's all I saw. So I'm just going to say, those are my heroes, the people that I knew that came before me that, did the thing without any hesitation, and they didn't switch and they didn't change. They didn't hide who they were. They were who they were. So that's my answer to that question. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Before I answer, I want to say my apologies to Danica for mispronouncing your name. Thank you, Saya, for pointing that out. As far as heroes, a lot of it for me were like musicians and artists, because before I was or felt, safe enough at a young age to like openly express who I was in the house or in, just in my hometown of Colorado Springs, which is sort of a bubble. And it's not until you move out of a place like that you realize the extent to which it affects your behavior and it affects your ability to show up as who you are. And so before I, had embraced terms like gay or queer, or before I started like, wearing makeup here and there, or things like that, it was musicians that I kind of vicariously lived through, as people like Prince, who, did bend gender, and, had like the assless chaps and, wore mascara and things like that. And also Michael Jackson, somewhat gender bending in his approach, like Little Richard, people like that like, these are Black men who are pushing the boundaries of what we're supposed to be. You can have softer lines You can embrace femininity. You can wear makeup. You can sing very high. You can be androgynous in your art and in your work. And one of the things that I, really appreciate in, I guess, in retrospect about Prince's work is his the verbiage he uses in describing like his identity in sexual situations. He describes himself in ways that are considered like effeminate, or sexual situations where the female character is in a sort of like position of power. And so like he's challenging these dynamics that we just sort of like take for granted. But yeah, a lot of musicians, Janelle Monáe, when she first blew up, she had on like the tuxedo and the pompadour, and I saw her image and that just like blew me away to see her. And then to see her as her career has progressed, like more embracing of her like pansexuality and, defying categories, Frank Ocean, Tyler, the Creator, people like that. I think like a lot of Black and, people of color artists who are embracing who they are and challenging like categories and categorization has always inspired me.
Sorry. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for responding. So this last one that we're getting into, it's kind of going to be a bit of a compound, and then we'll get into the Q&A portion, or whatever time that we do have left. So just to kind of move forward from that, how, as far as everybody here, how do you continue to show up every day in a society that continues to deny access, all access to rights you are deserving of? And with that, where does your resilience come from, and what does allyship and solidarity look like? So hopefully that's not too much of a word salad, but.
I'm gonna need it one more time, Stacey.
Yeah, for sure. So how do you continue to show up every day in a society that continues to deny you access to the rights you're deserving of? And, in that, where does your resilience come from, and how does allyship or accomplice, an accomplice look like for you?
I think it's showing up anyways. I know I saw like in the Q&A, someone asking questions around, those who lean into DEI work and compensation and that sort of thing. And it is definitely an interesting topic to dig into. But I got into doing this work, like in terms of volunteering without compensation in the organizations that I work for, because I wanted to make space for myself. Like in the spaces that I work for, especially in corporate spaces, like I'm not in a room with another person who looks and loves like me. So I voluntarily take this work on, and what I try to do in doing so is also looking around and seeing what other communities aren't being represented and are being marginalized even within our workspaces, and looking to bring them along with it. And so I mean, like that's how I just like continue to show up. Like, yeah, I'm anxious when I go out into new spaces, but I don't shrink away from it either. And it's just like holding your head up high and continuing to, there you go, and continuing to push back. Like some of that is like how you show up at work. Some of it's how you spend your money. Some of it's like all that kind of stuff. I mean, we're in Pride, and there's Pride branded stuff everywhere. My company is doing the same thing, right? But like, if those companies aren't actually like legitimately creating safe spaces for their LGBTQ plus associates, for their Black and Brown associates, because we've seen a lot of performative allyship around that over the past year or two, then like they're not about it. Don't spend your money there. Don't spend your money at Amazon. Spend it somewhere else. It takes shifting of behaviors, but like money's power.
And to that point, Danica, I have not given Jeff Bezos any money for the past year.
Don't get into that Pride Day discount.
Sure, not because I need something last minute for the parade. I know you lying. But yes, no, I wanted to jump off of what you were speaking on because I relate in a similar way, right? Because I am a diversity inclusion consultant, right? And a lot of times, right, it's interesting. A lot of times after I do a workshop or a training, I get feedback of, oh my goodness, you're just so nice. Like, other people come in doing DEI work and they're just so aggressive and they're so this, that, and the third. Well, for me, humor is a way that I have coped with a lot of things in my life because I just appreciate joy. And also, you know, DEI work is hard, right? We're talking like a lot of times it's me trying to figure out how do I convey the importance of these issues without re-traumatizing myself. Right. And doing it in a way where it can be heard because that's kind of my job. And at the same time, because of that, I have very strict boundaries outside of work. I'm very specific about who I spend my time with. Like if the energy that I'm receiving is not equal to the energy I'm giving, there's a mismatch. I try to avoid, like I am that person that's going to ask who all is there at the gathering or the event because I'm not trying to be the only BIPOC person present. And that's not a separatist ideology. That's a self-preservation because when I find that I'm the only person that is marginalized in a space, all of a sudden I get asked all these questions. I get a lot of focal point, or people don't know how to necessarily be around me, or you know, like there's comments, there's, you know, straight people think I'm trying to flirt with them when I'm like, yo, bobblehead looking self, I'm not trying to look at you at all, right? There's so much around there. And just even the stress of thinking about being in that space is sometimes too much. So for me, a lot of it is self-preservation, and making sure that I'm hanging around people that affirm my identity, that I can just chill, that I can just be myself and not have to worry about things. Because if I am in a space where I'm getting asked a lot of DEI questions, you best believe my Venmo will be very much available, and you can go ahead and hit that Venmo up. So yes, so resilience. How do I take care of myself? I think resiliency. For me, resiliency and basically going about my business is just very much that. I love what Danica said about walking with your head held high. And even Ty mentioned earlier, right, the blinders and kind of being tunnel vision. I don't know, and I don't speak for everybody, but I definitely did, and similar with Ty, had to learn how do you block that out? Like, again, I wore heels to my high school, y'all. So I was getting all of it. So from a very early age, I was learning, how do I block that out? How do I just keep moving about my business and just being like, okay, well, you know what? I'm still fabulous. I'm still going to rock it. I think there's just a strength and an experience that comes with that. And what I was thinking about earlier as we were talking about that type of resiliency is also the sadness in that, like the fact that we have to be so resilient. Even going back to, I really resonate with what you were sharing, Ty, about just trying to use the restroom, right? Like that's not just a simple solution conflict issue. We're really thinking about life. We're thinking about our lives. There are like in some states still have the gay panic defense where murdering an LGBTQ person is completely legal with no recourse. Right. And even this year we've had 20 plus, I believe, like trans women of color be murdered for their identities. Most of their cases will go unsolved. And so it's a very real concern. It's a very real strategy. It's a real survival strategy that a lot of us have taken on, of being super hypervigilant, being aware of our surroundings, making sure we have someone to go with us when we choose to go into a bathroom where we know it's going to be a risk. It's not simple. And to that point too, around allyship, for me, what is important is that you are doing your own education on your own time. Cool. Like, why you gotta like, if someone comes to ask me about my coming out experience, my question back to them is, or not my question back, but what I say in response is, I will tell you mine when you tell me yours, because you also had to grow up and learn how you like what you like and go through all these experiences where you were told what you could and could not wear and what you could and could not do, right? We've all had these experiences of gender experimentation, and yet for some reason our folks are the folks who are prompted the most. And let me tell you, Google and YouTube and all of that is 100% free. There are so many people who have already decided to be vulnerable and share their traumatic coming out experiences via the internet that you can access. There are documentaries, there are books, there are news articles, there are blogs, there are so many things out there that you can do your own research on and be prepared. And so what really bothers me is when people come to me and ask me like I'm supposed to know everything, or that I'm supposed to give you all this information for free when I can go and get paid for the information that I'm about to go give out. So I need folks to do their own research and do their own homework, because when you do that, you will start showing up differently automatically from your, just from your exposure. A lot of the work that I do is about talking about representation and models and exposure. The more you're exposed to different cultures, the more you'll be able to navigate those cultures in a way that's affirming, and you're gonna stop messing up. I promise. It takes time. I used to be homophobic and transphobic as well. Sorry, Stacey, I talk forever.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. No, I think
to start the
oh
violence.
you're fine. You're fine. We just have a little bit of a Q&A, but I hit off mute on accident. Like, you were all finished, Saya?
Yes, no.
Okay, perfect. No, that was my mistake.
Let me get off my soapbox.
So I apologize. I kind of compounded it, but I know we have the kind of Q&A at the end. So at least from my perspective, I'll just say that, I just, as far as showing up authentically, that's essentially all that I can do. The reason why I'm here is because there isn't a culture where I work. And I kind of realize that I'm being marginalized, even though on my free time, I'm stepping outside to try and make access for other, for people that are a part of my community. But at work, I'm experiencing these things. And, there's a certain point where you're in your, young transition days and you're not sure how to navigate things. And it becomes a matter of survival and safety. But we're now at the point where this is becoming a bigger conversation. I've always been who I am. There's now just a name for it. And you don't have to understand, or I don't have to educate you, but you do have to, respect and make an accommodation if, you want me in your workplace. So, so that's how it looks for me. And so I'll just keep that sweet and short, but I know Ty and Joseph may have something, and then we'll have the Q&A section with whatever time we have left. And I apologize for any fast talking. But thank you for allowing me to moderate for the first time ever. So thank you.
This is Ty. I can go ahead and go. How I show up in society, I show up as myself every day with a lot of power. I show up just like I am, and because I don't know any other way. I don't know how to do that. Going to church, I show up in this way, I was a practicing Christian for like 20 years, just here recently, started shifting a little bit, but I still showed up that same way. And one of the reasons why I shifted a little bit, I really didn't see myself in those areas like I wanted to see myself. So I'll just put a period on that one right there. But the next question was, where do I get my resilience from? I get my resilience from my parents, just the age and time that they lived in, being same-sex couples with kids and things like that they kept on. They didn't sway, they didn't water themselves down. They just continue. So I get my resilience from them, just continuing to move forward every day and just authentically being myself, and not feeling like I have to be something for somebody else. Just showing up in my Blackness, showing up in my I like to use the word gay. I know a lot of people don't like that, but just showing up in my gayness, just showing up with who I am every single day. So that's how I flow. And the third question was, how can people be allyship? I truly think allyship puts people of privilege in an uncomfortable situation in an effort to dismantle the institution. So putting them in an uncomfortable situation, but also putting them in a situation to dismantle the institution that put them in power in all the time in the first place. So just kind of making themselves uncomfortable and helping dismantle the systems that have put them in those privileged places, but also just navigating through that. If they can continue to be uncomfortable and put themselves in the situation. For instance, like Stacy going to the restroom, somebody should have stepped in and say, hey, I keep seeing in these chats, it's like, wait, we don't do that here. This is not how we operate. That's what allyship looks at, standing in that gap, whether, this is your belief or not, but just as a person, you can't just say that I'm an ally because my business buy gay flags or we do this and that. No, put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and say, hey, wait a minute, no, type of thing. So that's what I think, I believe that allyship looks like for me. Thank you all once again for listening, and I'm finished.
So I'm going to hop in here with the last 2 minutes that we have so I can say thank you to all of our panelists. There are many, many questions that were not yet answered. I promise I will send every last one of them to our panelists to get their thoughts on all of them, because there were quite a few really great questions. Ursuline or Hannah, can you put the link to the survey in here? So this is the first time we've ever done an interagency panel like this. And so we want to hear from all of the attendees. Is this something you enjoyed? Is this something you found value in? Is this something you'd like to see going forward? So we have a survey that we will put in the chat for you to fill out. Thank you all for coming. This was hugely important to us to get this message out, just to let people tell their own stories. So thank you for coming, all 400 plus of you. It was beautiful to see you. And we will make sure all of the resources that each of them shared, music, jobs, committees they're a part of, all the things, it will all be in the email that comes out later. So obviously it will not come out immediately. And I will also include the recording of this event in case you have any colleagues that you think need to see this, which is all of them, just as an FYI. So thank you for coming. Please let us know how else we can be of service to you. My email, Hannah's email, and Ursuline's email will all be included in that. Let us know what topics you want to hear, and we will do everything in our power to make sure those come to fruition. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Panelists, do you mind hanging for just a second?